The Oracle Network.
Welcome to Brew Crime. This is the podcast where we drink brews, talk crime, conspiracies, or whatever catches our attention. This is Mike and my co-host,
JT. How's it going, buddy?
Very good, very good.
What's going on up in Canada?
It's sunny today, a little bit warm. Nothing like it is over where you are, but it's a pretty good day.
Ida, who that has now turned into a tropical storm, decided to grace us with at least a band of her presence. And people are taking horse pills. All is well with the world.
Oh, it's happening here too. And there was a big protest against a vaccine passport here in a bunch of hospitals today. People need to get smacked.
Can I tell you? It has gotten so bad with the ivermectin here in the States that at least one, probably multiple, pharmacies that actually deal ivermectin for farm animals, they've actually asked for proof of horse to deal it to people because people continue to ask for it. Apparently there's like a 300% increase in poison control reports in Florida because people are all taking ivermectin, and they seem to think that the stringy whatever that's coming out the other side is COVID, and no, it's your stomach lining
and intestine lining and such.
Yeah. You're not winning this battle.
No. Well, the sad part is that the province of Alberta has had to do the same thing. And the city of Kelowna in BC has had to do the same thing.
Well, on behalf of, I can't apologize because my mind's not even in the realm of the media that are pushing this because it's so far off the scale of insanity that I don't feel like I could apologize for them, and they never will. So It is what it is, I guess. And now we're at that point where Charles Darwin's going, I told you so.
Yes,
so.
Exactly. Oh.
Welcome to the show, everybody. Welcome to Brew Crime.
Yes.
Where we talk about none of this stuff usually.
And, from that fun thing to, we're going to do the Province of Saskatchewan is what we're going to cover this time.
Saskatchewan.
Yes.
I have a nickname for it, but I'll reveal my nickname for it, during my story.
Oh,
I'm sure everybody from there will be so happy to hear
it. Probably, yeah.
We'll see.
All right. Well, I'm going to start today. So I'm calling my story Starlight Tours Sound So Innocent.
That's so clever.
But they're not. So the beer that I'm going to pair with this, I had trouble finding a pairing and I kind of ran out of time. So it's not really the name of the beer, but it's a sour beer. And this case definitely is a sour taste in my mouth. So this is the Rodenbach Classic. It's a Belgian sour ale. It's brewed in Belgium, 5.2% alcohol. And this is the Rodenbach Classic is the original Belgian sour ale. It is a refreshing blend of young and mature beer fermented and aged for 2 years in our standing oak casks, aka foeders. So yeah.
That looks good. The beer can is very I don't play games. This is what this is. It's like the can that I found of beer that just is a white label that says regular beer. That's all that's on the label except for what the FDA requires them to put up there.
Yeah, exactly.
But that's a can that takes no prisoners.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is like a deep reddish copper color, like a sort of a tan head on top. And I love it. It's like a really rocky head. There's big bubbles, there's small bubbles. It's got that nice sweet fruit note that you expect from this style of Belgian sour.
I love a good sour.
It's almost like a cherry note. It's definitely a lot sweeter on the nose than it is. You don't really smell that it's going to be sour. It's just really kind of fruity and maybe a hint of oak. And it's a pretty mild sour, a little bit tart kind of thing. little bit of a like cherry fruit or some other kind of berries. Pretty easy drinking. Maybe just a hint of the wood that's there, but not much. It's actually a really approachable sour beer, which some of the Belgian sours can be a little over the top for some people. That's nice.
So would you call it a nice like entrance sour to that world?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
That sounds good. It sounds so great.
Yeah, it's a nice beer for sure. Yeah, it's a Flanders red-brown beer, basically. So, yeah, they're nice. Canada has an awful tradition of systemic racism against Indigenous peoples, and this case is no different. And I mean, Canada's not alone in that. It's a worldwide problem, but... Canadians are finally learning what Indigenous people have known all along when it came to the Indian residential schools and the horrors that were done to the children. With over 100 years of horror, it's no surprise that Indigenous peoples need healing through reconciliation. Unfortunately, Starlight Tours are just another horror that Saskatchewan First Nations have had to deal with for a long time, and they are horrifying. Let's start out with the definition of what a Starlight Tour is. Starlight Tours were when police in Saskatoon would pick up First Nations or Indigenous peoples, mostly men, with the excuse that they were drunk, disorderly, and then sometimes they had no excuse. They would take these people outside of the city limits, usually in the winter, and then drop them, often with no jackets or proper clothing, in temperatures that would drop below minus 20 Celsius or minus 4 Fahrenheit. Yeah. Can't think of much more awful thing to do.
No, typically you're used to people at this point are probably like, well, he's got to have something witty to say. I don't, because that's fucked up.
Yeah. The first documented Starlight Tour, but absolutely not the first, was on May 22nd, 1976. First Nations people had heard rumors of these tours happening, but it seemed to only be rumors up until this point. This day would prove that the rumors were true. 3 First Nations people, including 2 men and 1 pregnant woman, were drinking in the public somewhere around Saskatoon when a police officer pulled up. The officer would arrest the 3 and claim it was for having liquor in a place other than a dwelling, but he would forget to file the paperwork. The 3 wouldn't be all that worried at first, though, as a drunk tank isn't the worst place to spend your time. There's worse places, right? I've never been, but I can assume. They had seen worse from the sounds of their statements. Shit got real, though, when they noticed they were leaving the city limits. They would get a long way out of town when the cop pulled over and got out of his car. He would move to the back door of the car and open it. From here, he would force the 3 out of the car and then get back into the car himself and drive off.
What? Okay.
Yeah. Looking back at the Old Farmer's Almanac online, the temperature that night was only 4 Celsius or 39 Fahrenheit.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome. What a fucking horrifying reality that you are stranded far outside of town and have to walk back to quote unquote civilization, as there isn't likely to be a lot of traffic out there late at night. And on top of that, the racism would dictate that people wouldn't be unlikely to pick up 3 Indigenous people on a dark highway.
No, and I would imagine that even when they did hit a little bit of civilization, so to speak, nobody's going to help.
Yeah, probably not.
Like, they won't let them in. I prefer cold over warm, but there's no way. And like that to me is unforgivable.
Yeah, agreed. The 3 would begin their long walk back to Saskatoon, but it was really hard for the pregnant woman. She would fight the fact that she was 8 months pregnant and would have to hold her belly up with her 2 hands.
Oh my God. Between
that, she would have to hold her back as it would kill her. At one point, she would have to sit down on a boulder as she couldn't go any further. The 2 men that had been walking with her, both brutally tired, would not notice that she had fallen behind. After a long time, she would finally sober up some and get back on her feet, continue the horrible march back into town. Luckily, all 3 people would live this time, but sadly, this is not always the case. Now, of course, the police officer would claim this was all bullshit and would almost get off scot-free. In the end, In the end, he would end up with an embarrassing $200 fine for this crime.
What? That's not.
Yeah.
That is a pittance.
Yeah.
$200. I don't even know if that's embarrassing. It's just like, that's a beer story. Like, that's a bar story. It's like, I did this to these people and all I got was $200 fine.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, that's ridiculous. Okay.
Let's move into some more recent cases of Starlight Tours now. The first recorded death from a Starlight Tour that I could find was of Neil Stonechild in the 1990s. Neil Stonechild was a 17-year-old kid who had charisma, good looks, and was popular in the community. He struggled with issues such as alcoholism and had a history of criminality, likely at least partially driven by his alcohol abuse. But he was also an accomplished mural painter as well as a talented wrestler. He was actively going to Alcoholics Anonymous and made sure he made every meeting.
That's good.
Yeah, like he was trying to make his life better, right?
Yeah.
You know, everyone deals with different issues. I mean, growing up can be really hard in some families, right?
Well, and if we put mural painter to the side, being a wrestler, a lot of wrestlers have a lot of substance issues, mostly because they just want to dull the pain from each weekend or whatever they're doing. So I'm sure that wasn't easy to go to Alcoholics Anonymous and still do that. So.
Yeah. So he had been living in a foster home outside the province for a time, but was back in Saskatoon, and he connected with his family. Neil went to a party on November 24th, 1990, and was enjoying drinks with his friends. Neil and his friend Jason Roy, who lived in a group home together, would leave the party just before midnight in minus 25 Celsius or minus 13 Fahrenheit, a miserable night. Neil and Jason would separate after leaving the party for some reason, couldn't figure out why. Jason Roy would be walking in the very early hours of the morning when he was stopped by the police. In the back seat was a beaten Neil Stonechild. He was bloodied with a possible broken nose, and he was also handcuffed. This wasn't the first time he'd been roughed up by the police either, as it is noted that it happened at least 2 other times. So it's the quote, "Help me, they're going to kill me." These are the last words Roy says he heard from Stonechild.
Oh my gosh.
Jason was scared of the police, so he claimed to not know Neil and gave the cops a false name. I mean, it's so horrible, but I really don't blame him either. They would let him go on his way, luckily for him, but not so lucky for Neil. Neil Stonechild would not be seen for days after this altercation. Sadly, his body would be found on November 29th, 1990, in an industrial area that was still under development. He was found in a light jacket, missing one shoe, 9 kilometers or 5.6 miles out of town. The family would hold his funeral on December 3rd, and the family noticed that there were cuts on the bridge of his nose, and it looked to be broken as well as bruising on his wrists that looked like they were from handcuffs. The police would claim that Neil was responsible for his own death.
So they're saying that he handcuffed himself, he lost his own shoe, and he found himself in a half-built industrial area.
Yeah. Yeah.
Checks out. Sure.
Yeah.
And they took ivermectin. It just all... All right, anyways, moving on.
Here's a quoted portion of a report from the Star Phoenix. Jarvis concludes the Stonechild file. His report doesn't address why Stonechild was missing a shoe, how he walked 9 kilometers to an industrial area in the snowstorm, or how he incurred cuts on his nose. Jason Roy's statement that he saw Stonechild in the back of Sernger's and Hartwitt's cruiser is excluded from the report. The police would also never release any of Neil's belongings, including his jacket that was originally his brother's.
Here's the thing. If it's anybody else, right, and they're the last person to see a person alive in any way, shape, or form, and then they lie about that, they are like suspect number one. Number one.
Mm-hmm.
But not in this case.
Nope.
This is wild.
Move on to 1998. Still no consequences for the police or any closure to the murder of Neil Stonechild, and the Saskatoon police destroy the original file for the investigation into his death. 8 years and gone.
I smell a cover-up.
Yeah. An inquiry into his death would not happen until September 8th, 2003, and it would run until May 19th, 2004.
Golly.
The report would not be released until October 26, 2004. Like, how crazy is that?
there's always this expectation by a lot of folks, and sometimes I follow into it as well, where like, come on, we got a 50-minute episode, got to wrap it up. Like, you know, like things should be that fast. And I know that law enforcement, I know that any of that, it doesn't work that way, and I get that. However, there is a line that you cross into. You're just neglecting this on purpose.
Yeah,
and
it didn't come out until almost 25 years later, basically.
That's disgusting.
So here are the short form findings from the Conversation website. That's the website. The findings of the inquiry established that police constables Larry Hartwig and Bradley Senger took Stonechild into custody, and that the injuries and marks to his body were likely caused by handcuffs. Hartwig and Senger argued their innocence and said they did not have contact with Stonechild that night. Evidence to the contrary was presented.
Yeah, I'd imagine. I'd hope so.
Yeah. The evidence led Justice David H. Wright to conclude that Hartwig did recall the events that night, despite his assertions otherwise. And as such, his assertions are deliberate deceptions designed to conceal his involvement.
Selective amnesia, my friend.
The inquiry, through witness after witness testimony, offered a lesson in systemic racism in a settler state. But the recommendations did not address systemic racism and instead focused primarily on race relations. Hartwig and Senger were dismissed from duty in November 2004, within a month of the report's release. They appealed, their appeals were rejected, and the courts upheld the findings of the inquiry. So this time, at least they lost their jobs 25 years late, but...
I was going to say, and they got a slap on the wrist, they lost their job, and they probably got some kind of pension.
Probably a severance or pension, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so they've made that distance, like, unless you've removed them without a pension, in which case, all right, but they still should be in jail.
Yeah, but they didn't mention that in any of the research that I did, so probably not the case.
Yeah.
All right. January 28th, 2000, so back a few years, would see Daryl Knight hanging out at a house party. The party was getting a bit too crazy for him, so he decided to take off. All he had on was a shirt and a jean jacket, and it was minus 22 Celsius or minus 7.6 Fahrenheit. So I have to assume he had a plan to get home, right? Like, you're not leaving in that temperature without a plan if you don't have any real clothes on.
Now, Mike, correct me if I'm wrong. I've never been in that temperature before. Have you been in that kind of a temperature before?
Yeah, once.
Okay. I like just leaving a house. I mean, you have to catch your breath.
Yeah. Well, yeah. At minus 22, you should have your mouth covered with a balaclava or some kind of face covering.
He just had like a Nehru, like he just had like a KISS jacket on.
Yeah, basically, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'd hope that he had a plan to get home.
Yeah, like you need a parka and probably another layer at least. Yeah.
For sure.
Unfortunately, as soon as he stepped outside, 2 Saskatoon police officers would grab him and arrest him. They would stuff him into the back of the patrol car and start driving out of town. They would drop him off 5 kilometers out of town, and when he told them that he was afraid for his life, all the police officer said was, quote, "That's your fucking problem." And then they drove away and left him there.
I am so angry, and your choice of a sour beer makes so much more sense.
Yes.
Every minute you tell this story, I just grow more and more sour.
Yes.
Ugh.
Daryl was really lucky, and he was able to get the attention of someone at the Queen Elizabeth Power Station near where he was. He was then able to call a cab to get back home. The 2 police officers, Dan Hatchen and Ken Munson, would claim that they had only given him a night ride home, and he had asked to be dropped off there.
What? Who? I'm going to let you keep going because I'm sure there's something else that you're going to say next that's going to piss me off even more.
Luckily, the 2 officers were convicted of unlawful confinement in September 2001 and would get 8-month sentences.
I'm a little less pissed.
So definitely not long enough, but at least there was a consequence.
And it's a lot harder to come by these days.
Yeah.
Consequences. So, yeah.
So Daryl was a lucky one after that ordeal. He left Saskatchewan for British Columbia and has never returned. So this is a quote from him. In Saskatoon, I found it very hard to recover from and move on from what they did to me that January night. He says, typing his message to his sister because he still has trouble hearing and communicating due to trauma from the incident. He is now 49 years old.
Jeez.
Quote, I have never received an apology from the police for what was done to me. Unquote. The very next day, January 29th, 2000, Rodney Naistus, 25 years old, was found frozen to death and not dressed for the frigid weather. He was found near the same power plant that Daryl Knight was dropped at.
So they were just picking people off.
Yeah. Indigenous people they didn't like.
So here, if you're going to do this, you might as well just pull out a weapon because you're torturing to death.
Yep.
That's what you're doing. And I can't, they need to be checked for so many different like mental issues.
Yep.
I can't imagine. Wild.
So Lawrence Wegner, I think that's how you pronounce his last name, Wegner, would be found deceased also near the same power plant on February 3rd, 2000, the next month, and only a couple days later. The Saskatoon police would finally ask the RCMP to come in and do an outside investigation. Yeah.
How long did it take?
But it's still asking another police, it's just asking the RCMP to come in. I mean, police always just protect their own.
Well, they're hoping that the optics look good, right?
Yeah.
But the bottom line is like, you're asking yourself to investigate yourself, and you will never find yourself in the wrong.
The Saskatoon police chief would state that, quote, 2 officers involved in the complaint came forward last Monday of their own free will and were forthright with all information. The 2 officers, one 10 years on the force and the other 15 years on the force, would get a 30-day suspension pending an internal police investigation into the complaint.
Probably paid.
Probably, yeah.
Again, I'm bringing this up, and I'm guessing it wasn't in the research, though. So,
no. So another quote here. This is nothing short of blatant abuse of authority, abuse of power, and anybody who takes their dog out like that would be charged.
Yes.
This is Lawrence Joseph of the Federation of Saskatchewan Indian Nations. And that's true. Like, if you did that to an animal, you would go to jail. So why aren't these officers going to jail?
That blue line, baby.
Yeah. The officers in these 2 murders and the first drop-off were never charged.
That's egregious.
Yep. Now, of course, with these cases I have laid out here, this is only a small window in what must have actually been going on from the 1970s all the way into the 2000s. And likely is probably still going on today.
Yeah, that kind of an action doesn't just kind of come up. It's something that is passed down in order to do that, number one, and to get away with it, number two.
Yeah.
And I think that my frustration with all of this is that there wasn't even investigation.
Not a real investigation.
Not really, yeah, at all. And I mean, that is where the fury comes into play, is like there wasn't even any kind of half-assed due diligence. It was just kind of like, they came by, they said their piece, they're okay.
Yep. So the police were actively leaving Indigenous people, usually intoxicated, outside in freezing temperatures with little to no clothing or a way to get home. These people should rot in jail.
Mm-hmm.
Even worse, the police service was caught multiple times between 2012 and 2016 deleting the Starlight Tours information that was on their Wikipedia page.
They hired one person.
Yeah.
Just to be like, nope.
Yeah.
I just want to say, like, you can't even delete a bad review on iTunes. Like, you shouldn't be able to delete. It's just like, if you're the entity people are talking about, you should be able to maybe appeal it, maybe address it with the website, but you shouldn't be able to just rehash history. So,
Yep. Even worse is that Saskatoon is not the only place that these Starlight Tours are happening either. This is systemic, with at least 76 people being dumped outside of the city of Winnipeg, Manitoba over the years. it can be deduced that these Starlight Tours are likely happening in many more towns and cities in Canada, as the relationship between police and Indigenous people is terrible in all communities.
I don't understand obviously I do not live in Canada. So I don't, where is this hate coming from? I mean, I asked that, and I live in America, and racism is systemic and a massive problem, and I don't understand that either, though. So why?
I mean, settler cultures in general usually hate the people that were there before because they want to get rid of them so that they can make it better.
But we're far past that. Like,
You'd
you know what I
think.
mean? Like, you would think, right?
You would think, yeah, you would.
You'd think.
But we're not. And it's, look at the United States. Same thing with Indigenous people there. I think you call them...
right.
What do you call them?
Native Americans.
Native Americans. There we go. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Native Americans, it was Indians.
Same here. It's still the Indian Act. There's still Indian reservations, even though that is not a term you would use. It's... Depending on, like, Indigenous is the main overarching term, but there's lots that identify as First Nations. There's the Métis in the middle of Canada that were half French, half Indigenous. And then there's the Inuit up in the north, right?
Right. And so this is the part that absolutely destroys me, other than the actual case itself. It's like, you are literally the law enforcement for the country overall, and you've won. Like, you've won. You win. Whether it is defined as winning or not, like, if you want to see it that way, you won. Move on to something else. Like, I don't know, do your actual job. So
yeah,
I'm calling them out, and I don't even live there, and I feel kind of silly doing that, but for real, like,
yeah,
I don't get it.
Well, I mean, and if we ever want to actually get rid of crime, it's not going to be through using a club.
No.
It's spending money on social services. It's, fighting homelessness by getting people into shelters or housing. It's finding ways to get people jobs. It's not beating down the poor. It's, propping up the poor because that gets rid of crime. Help with addiction counseling, all kinds of stuff like that.
And even just making it affordable.
Yeah.
Right? Just making addiction counseling affordable.
Yeah. Or making it available, period.
Right.
It's not usually available at all for the poorest, right? The homeless or the houseless or whatever we call it.
And even if it is, it's not proudly mentioned.
No, of course not.
Yeah. Ugh.
Yeah, it's frustrating as hell. But yeah, now that we're thoroughly depressed, I think it's time to move on to the next case.
Oh, we're going to make it so much better.
I'm sure we are.
All right. So I have dubbed this case He's Lost His Seashells. Because it is about the Shell Lake murders.
Not a lot of sea in Saskatchewan. Landlocked and all.
But that's about as creative as I could get at this point. So I'm going to open the beer. I've paired kind of a time-old classic, New Belgium's Fat Tire, their amber ale, and I found something that was obviously written by what I feel is an employee of theirs. So the reason why I picked this beer is because it is the opposite of what this case is about. I mean, this is a very balanced beer, and this is about a very unbalanced or imbalanced person, which sounds like I'm making a joke. I'm not. Yeah, so the beer is, it's one of, let me just read this quote. Many a drinker's first forays into a flavorful beer. Fat Tire's signature swath of biscuity toasty malt is well tempered with gentle hopping. The fairly voluminous head lingers, a perfect white muffin top on a dark golden amber body. Will it change your life? Maybe. Will you enjoy it? Probably so. It's very dramatic.
It is, yes.
But, I agree. It's kind of, in college, I drank like really low shelf beers because they're cheap. And then I was introduced to Fat Tire, and it was kind of a nice foray into more craft stuff. And that's what that is. But that's what I picked. It's New Belgium's Fat Tire. So mental health has always been a fascination of mine. As someone personally who suffers from anxiety and depression, The brain and mind is a terribly interesting part of our humanity. And in addition, the history of mental health is both horrifying and fascinating as well. And in my own opinion, it's driven by the lack of understanding and fear of what might be contained within the mind.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, yeah. The Shell Lake murders committed by Victor Ernest Hoffman sent me down a rabbit hole of mental health history. This is one of those cases that as I go through this moment and Saskatchewanian history, I don't even know if that's the correct way to say it.
Saskatchewan history.
All right, I made it more difficult than it had to be. Story of my life. We all get frustrated together. We're going to get frustrated together. Why did this happen? What was the driving force behind it? Were the decisions made about Hoffman's mental health correct, or were the decisions a product of the times? Could something like this happen today? So there's so many different ways to start this discussion, but I think what I believe is the best way is to begin with the kind of a brief history of mental health in general and, in Canada. I think one of the important things to remember is that there are no answers. The Canadian Encyclopedia says there is, quote, no clear line that divides the mentally healthy from the mentally unhealthy. And in addition, the definition of mental health is relative and is dependent on cultural context. Yep. So let's offer a little bit of context here. In the early years, mental health was defined as the absence of symptoms of mental illness. Hippocrates was one of the first writers who challenged the belief that there were supernatural causes of mental illness, and he claimed that mental illness was more physiological and natural than anything. And by Middle Ages, attempts to explain mental illness went by the wayside of science, and they kind of moved away from philosophical theories, and it was replaced by demonology and witchcraft, as one does.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Around the mid-1500s, Johann Weyer opposed attributing mental health disorders to possession by the devil. Go, Johann.
Yeah, for sure.
Demons
are cool,
he's our man.
But they're not doing that.
Right. No, I don't. I think they got better things to do. Late 1700s to early 1800s, Philippe Pinel was a prime reformer to advocate a humane approach to mental patients. And in 1714, Hotel Dieu in Quebec, I assume it's Dieu, it's D-I-E-U.
Do I don't know, yeah.
Provided a ward for women who were mentally ill, and in addition took about 12 men. Overall, care of the mentally ill was the responsibility of the family. Patients who could not be cared for were placed in jails and poorhouses, which you can only imagine had deplorable conditions.
Yeah. I'd just like to say, too, I think the women with mental health that had that house, it's probably because they spoke out to their husbands and stuff.
Yeah, and I think we covered that in British Columbia, too. I mean, yeah, as much as reading a book, that wasn't the Bible. It'll put you in an asylum. How dare you read the Scarlet Letter?
You awful human.
Yeah. Education. Yeah, right. Burn the witch. In 1835, asylums for the insane were opened in St. John, New Brunswick, and in 1841 in Toronto. Changes in Canada were initiated by Dorothea Dix, Richard Buck, Charles Clark, Clifford Beers, and Clarence Hicks. Dr. Bucks was an appointed superintendent of the Asylum for the Insane in Hamilton in 1876. He believed mental illness was, quote, failure of the biological process by which mankind adapts to change. Dr. Clark ceased to restrain inmates, and in 1893, he advocated that the term asylum be dropped. Go, Dr. Clark.
Damn.
Clifford Beers and Dr. Hinks organized the Canadian National Committee for Mental Hygiene, which later became the Canadian Mental Health Association in 1918. In 1930, Dr. Hinks was one of the first physicians to recognize the value of prevention and of treating sufferers of mental illness before they were incapacitated. So a little proactive treatment instead of reactive. Psychologist Samuel Laycock, under the influence of Dr. Hinks, became professor of educational psychology in 1927 at University of Saskatchewan and director of education for the Mental Hygiene Committee in 1929. World War II began and affected attitudes towards mental health. Medical examinations of recruits revealed that thousands of healthy adults suffered mental difficulties. This changed the public's thoughts about mental health in a huge way and kicked off research into preventative measures and methods. This also created a better understanding of emotional needs of children and of the role of stress in causing mental disorder. Woof.
Yeah.
What a timeline.
But yeah, like lots of things happen in there for sure. It's good to see things trying to get better.
Well, it's one of those moments where everybody thinks that person that's suffering is the other.
Yeah.
Right. And when the war came in, you've got family, friends, etc., loved ones who are going through this treatment, or not treatment, but examination, and they're being told that, hey, you might have this. And now it ties closely to home, right? So now let's look at a different way to describe this.
Yeah.
I mean, it happens all the time. People are othered until they are, the folks who other experience it themselves.
Yeah, for sure.
So mental health as a study and treatment is one of the newer sciences, relatively. Hasn't been discussed for a while, sure. But it truly wasn't until World War II and the aftermath that it was deemed more than just what seemed to be a high school science project. So that's your quick timeline on mental health and illness, both in general and in Canada. And there's a lot to consider there. So, I encourage everyone to kind of do some research and learn about it themselves.
But read peer-reviewed papers. Don't just do
Please.
YouTube research, please.
Good grief. Move past the Google and the YouTube. At least type in scholar.google.
Yeah, no doubt.
It's not hard. Scholar is not that hard to spell. Okay. So there are a number of resources available regarding the case of Shell Lake murders committed by Victor Hoffman. However, I have to say one of the best resources I found was by F.H. Kahan. I'm going to say Khan, called Schizophrenia, Mass Murder, and the Law. And it seems like a generic paper, but it does a deep, deep dive into our case today. The Shell Lake murders took place in, well, you guessed it, Shell Lake, Saskatchewan in Canada. And I'm fully aware that Mike picked this province just to hear me say that.
Yeah, and I mean, you know what? You can actually say it now, which is kind of a bummer in some ways.
But from here on out, I'm probably going to call Saskatchewan Sassy Sketchy. That's right. That's my nickname for Saskatchewan, Sassy Sketchy. You can stop me, but I'm not going to stop.
Yeah.
So...
yeah, just they're gonna rough ride you all the way about that.
Feel free to
did you catch
you can
that?
at me. You can at me. I just got back onto Twitter. Let's use that as a transition, shall we? I am at JT Brews Crime. JT BREWSCRIME. Send your hate mail there.
Did you catch my my CFL joke there?
No, I totally missed it.
Saskatchewan Rough Riders.
Oh, yes. Well, just saying it alone is a rough ride. So,
yeah.
So, I mean, but I'd like to call them Sassy Sketchy. I mean, I think if the Rough Riders come to play with the BC Lions, that's the chant you should start. I think it would fly. All right.
I'll zoom you into the game and you can try to yell it over my phone, okay?
This would be fantastic. I'm close enough. All right. So the Northern Saskatchewan Highway, I'm sorry, the Sassy Sketchy Highway, I get that right. It brings one to Leask, and it joins up with another highway to Shell Lake. The villages around there were populated with primarily farm-based communities, and many folks who lived there had lived there for years, and it was quite the community where everyone knew each other, a lot like Cheers, where everybody knows your name. So you all, Mike, everyone, this town sounds almost idyllic. At least it seemed like it was. Shell Lake specifically, it had around 250 people in it. There was one hotel, a cafe, a beer parlor. That tells you about the time this was written. There was a park, cabins, a beach, and a golf course. I'm not sure what golf looked like back in the 1960s, but I pretend it's about Robin Williams' joke, and probably a lot like it did now.
It probably looks the same, except that the woods probably actually were made of wood, and
for real. I mean, it couldn't get much whiter than it already is, so I'm assuming it pretty much stayed the same. All right.
When did Tiger Woods finally get to play that one course that didn't allow black people? It stayed white for a long time.
I am surprised that not enough people bring up the fact that golf is an extremely racist overall institution.
Oh yeah,
but we'll just leave it at that.
It's getting a lot better, I think, because of Tiger Woods. And then the women's game has always had lots and lots of Chinese girls and women. And I say girls because literally there's 14-year-olds playing on the LPGA.
Oh man, they kicked my ass. I can't play golf to save my life.
I've played it once a year for work for a golf tournament, and I just get drunk and drive a golf cart.
And that's because 18 holes takes a year to finish.
Oh, God, does it ever?
All right, so in either case, my thought is that it must have been an amazing golf course because people came as far away as Saskatoon.
Ooh.
Which reminds me of Brigadoon, Saskatoon. All right. So I'll tell you this. That's about kind of where the happiness stops.
Yeah. Did you look at how far that actually is?
No. Watch it be really close.
Hour.
Okay. Well, that's a long way for a golf People travel much further.
Yeah. 105 kilometers.
That's not bad. I'll tell you this. So that's where the happiness stops. Victor was born in 1946. Also in 1946, in case anybody was interested, Dr. Spock's baby and childcare influences millions of new and expectant parents throughout the U.S. Strapless bras become popular. Tide, the first detergent for automatic clothes washing machines, was introduced along with the first electric clothes dryers.
Oh, it took a little while for them to make Tide Pods so that people can eat them, but...
God. I said we weren't going to go back to the horse pills. Now, there's no difference between the two.
Not really.
Mm-mm. And then suntan lotions, which were developed for troops during World War II, marketed to consumers for the first time.
Wow.
Yeah, so a little bit about 1946, a little context. In either case, Victor grew up in an ordinary family of devout Lutherans, as one does. I'm going to assume that means there probably wasn't an electric clothes dryer or a strapless bra. That's just...
Probably not.
I'm just going to say. The Hoffman family practiced mixed farming, and they followed a routine of the seasons. They rarely took a holiday, and they chose to keep Sundays holy. Mr. Hoffman, when speaking about the location, said, quote, "All here are our friends, everybody. We live in a nice district, and the people are very nice. We are well known here." As with many, many parents, Victor was, good at what he did. He was responsible. He was a good farmer. He worked hard. He walked at the age of 9 months and talked at the age of 10 months. Wow.
Yikes. Wow.
He started school when he was 6, but repeated grades 3 and 9. He didn't drink or smoke. He had one close friend, but was mostly a loner. And he occasionally went to church to make his dad happy, which is honestly probably the story of many children. So.
Yeah, I went to church so I didn't get in trouble.
Yep. And now we do a true crime podcast.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what you do. His dad said, and keep this in mind, that it is the 60s, so verbiage surrounding mental health was a bit different.
Yeah, probably pretty bad.
Before you come for me for that, pick sassy sketchy first, and then, then come for me for this.
Yeah.
But let it be known that the disclaimer's been made. So, quote, "Victor went right up to grade 9. If anyone were on the mental side of life, he would not be able to take grade 9. The principal one day, well, something happened there. He started to play hooky when he got to be in grade 9, and I guess something was going wrong. The principal asked Victor why he wasn't coming to school. We talked for a while, and the principal said Victor is no trouble. He's very good in school, and he'd have no trouble going right up to grade 12. But then something went wrong." So, yeah. His dad continued to explain how he wasn't, quote, mental from childhood like the detectives and police had said. He used the explanation that Victor was very good at putting in a crop. And he did a great job, and he said that if something was wrong with him, he couldn't have done that. Personally, I don't think that necessarily does a good job explaining his mental health at the time.
No,
but it was important for his dad to talk about that, so we'll let him have it. And by the end, we'll understand just how little he knew about mental health. So despite being able to plant a crop well, Victor's father said, quote, "But it went just like that. There were about 3 weeks when I knew there was something badly wrong. He got worse and worse, and finally we took him to Prince Albert. It was the first time we had taken him to a doctor for mental illness." Prince Albert was Saski's third and largest sanatorium for the treatment of tuberculosis. It was opened on January 6th, 1930. You look like you had something there.
It's ridiculous that they made asylums and tuberculosis clinics the same thing.
Yeah, it's great. Just house the folks that are not feeling well psychologically with the folks that are indeed
coughing their lungs out.
Coughing their lungs out and contagious.
Yeah.
Yes. 5 years later, after opening in 1930, they reported that 7,591 people were treated or examined in order to combat the spread of the disease, probably because they were transmitting it within the building.
Probably.
Oh, man. So the sanatorium was closed May 1961, despite objections from people in the city. Folks didn't understand why there were choices to keep other institutions over Prince Albert. And I'm guessing someone had a bad experience getting a Prince Albert, but that's just me. Man, dad joke central.
Yeah, that's a painful one.
That's some low-hanging fruit on my part.
Yeah, I mean the piercing, not the joke.
That shit, well, a little bit of both.
Yeah.
Sad trombone. So the problem here is that it was known for treating northern residents. When Prince Albert closed down, the patients, of which were of Indigenous descent, were moved to Fort Qu'Appelle Sanatorium, which made it even more difficult for people to visit them.
Of course.
Imagine that. there's a theme that runs through our two stories other than Saskatchewan.
That's unfortunate. It sounds just like the residential schools, which were purposely put further away from the reserves so that people couldn't see their kids and their kids couldn't run back to the parents.
It's literally exactly what cults do. They separate you from your family. I mean, it's just a step. That's wild.
Well, I mean, that's really what a lot of governments are, basically.
Yeah. So Prince Albert was reused as North Park Center. This was the Saskey Training School for mentally handicapped from July 1961 until it was closed in February 1988. So with our timeline, it looks like this might have been where Victor was taken during that moment. Also, I do realize that saying Saskey really makes it sound like it's a city in Mississippi. It is not. So we heard mostly from Victor's father in regards to what brought them to take Victor to Prince Albert. However, despite their confidence that Victor was okay up until that time, the reality was that Victor was schizophrenic most of his life.
Oh, geez. That's a rough one. To not be getting help for it?
Yeah. Oh, you're about to go on a ride. Victor told doctors at the facility that he was in that by 6, he saw the devil. He said the creature was 6 feet tall. It was black as night, and it had long hair.
It's always so bad. This kind of thing happens with so many like really, really religious people where they see like the devil or whatever and demons. And it's so sad when that gets tied into mental health issues, and it can really spiral fast.
Well, and you know, before we move on, it's one of those things where, you know, people mention that, right? And then all of a sudden psychology or mental illness takes a back seat and religion takes the foreground, right? And all of a sudden people forget. And that's the case in a lot of things that I think we've covered and that we're going to cover.
Yeah.
So he felt, you know, at the age of 6 that he was in the middle of a battle of seduction between the devil and God. He said he would hear tapping sounds that went faster and faster. By the age of 10, he had strange daily impulses to kill. He never told his parents about this, and he got away with this because he directed his impulses against animals. At this point, I would like to say, tale as old as time.
Yep.
He once caught a cat by accident, as one does, I suppose. He caught a cat by accident. He chose to toss it in the smokehouse. The cat was left in there for weeks. But then Victor decided to let it go because he felt bad for it. I guess the cat survived. So for anybody who was worried about the cat, sounds like it survived.
I wonder if the smokehouse is like just like smoked salmon or whatever, where there could actually be food in there. So even though it's stuck, then maybe there's something for it to feed on. Maybe. Yeah.
And I mean, perhaps he let him out because the cat was left alone in a dark place and it reminded him of someone he knew, himself.
Yeah.
Of course, despite this, he also clubbed cats. He stomped on them and he killed dogs. And he said killing animals made him happy.
Fucking monster.
Yeah. He moved on to people when he started beating up a young boy and continued to beat him. And then he killed all the local squirrels, literally hundreds of them. So, you know.
Although it sounds like some farm areas where they kill all the groundhogs and stuff, but yeah.
I mean, and personally, I don't technically have anything against squirrels, but I had one bite me once, so take them all out.
Kill them all.
Yeah. So Victor continued hearing the devil, seeing disembodied cold hands floating across the room. He felt them touching him. He also had the devil helping him pick berries. Victor, I guess the devil likes to pick some berries. It reminds me of the berries and cream guy. I'm a little guy who likes berries and cream.
Don't know that one.
That's fine. It's a very niche joke.
It's so hard because this kid probably could have turned out all right if he had just gotten help for his very serious issues. And I mean, there's lots of people that live with schizophrenia and live very healthy lives with, proper medication and mental health treatment, right? It's like all mental health. As long as you can get help, you can live a great life.
Absolutely. Now, while he saw demons, he also saw angels as well. He said that one guardian angel tried to protect him and told him many times that he must not kill crows. Once, when the devil attacked her, Victor found himself with a sword, and he also was attacking another smaller angel, along with the devil attacking the guardian angel. So in addition, Victor liked to steal guns and ammunition. He broke into a store in order to do so. However, he was caught and did spend a day in jail. So the devil continued to come to him and asked him to sell his soul. At one point, Victor's mom caught him shooting his gun up in the air a couple times, and when she approached him, she asked him what he was doing, and he said, quote, "I shot the devil." Victor took the car and drove away for a while.
Is the devil not supposed to be down, though? Like, that's kind of what I understand.
I thought the devil was down in Georgia.
Not Atlanta, because Atlanta's pretty cool, but somewhere else in Georgia, probably.
Yeah. So Victor took the car. He said that he took the car and drove away for a while, which is a great idea. But while he was gone, his family hid all the weapons in the house. And when he got back, he wanted to speak to the pastor. So gave him some time. They hid the weapons. They knew that much, do that.
Yeah.
His mother overheard him saying that he would like to kill her while he was talking to the pastor. Needless to say, the next day he was committed to Saskatchewan Hospital in North Battleford.
Probably a good move. You want to kill your mom? That's not good.
And if the story hadn't already gone off the rails, here's where it really takes a left turn. It's indicative of the mental health treatment style in Canada in the 1960s. I personally was not impressed. I don't think many people would be. But I think even today, no matter what country you're in, it's still pretty hit or miss. And we've talked about this many, many times.
It's pretty miss or miss, maybe hit.
Yeah. So a psychiatrist determined Victor was in a state of acute schizophrenic reaction who needed to be hospitalized. And after talking about some of the items he had been going through, Victor signed himself in as a voluntary admission and was admitted May 29th, 1967. So what were some of Victim's symptoms and behaviors that were identified? He talked to himself. He laughed when he was alone, which I do, but, a little different. Concerned whether he was a boy or a girl, which that we are ideally, we're farther advanced in terms of this, but
I wonder if he was also dealing with, possibly being trans and not knowing it on top of schizophrenia then.
He very much could have been.
Which, again, would just throw another whole friggin' wrench on the pile, especially in an ultra-religious neighborhood family.
It would. Now, I found no research to say other than these were some of the symptoms and behaviors that he had. The next one was God had told him he would go to heaven. He had stomach cramps and burning sensations. He was preoccupied with sex. He masturbated every day. He was fatigued and weak. He was sleepless with no remorse.
How old was he at this time?
21.
Okay, so maybe that's a little old to be, acting like a 16-year-old boy. But
a little bit. But, then again, yeah. I mean, he was in an asylum of sorts,
true,
right?
Yeah.
And
nothing else to do.
You're sitting there, and they don't really let you do anything. So
it's true.
I
guess some of those angels may be pretty. I don't know.
Jesus. Victor also had visions and feelings that put a lot of what we've heard in the past to shame. He said he felt he was somebody else. He told the doctors the devil put another brain in his body, and it was, quote, a special kind of punishment for refusing to sell him his soul. He believed the brain in his skull belonged to someone named Denise. He said he was able to touch the devil and angels and that he once tore off the blouse of an angel. So if we take a combination of him being raised in a highly religious family and we combine it with his mental illness, and then we combine it with the possibility that he might have been trans or confused or whatever it might have been, right?
There at least seems to be the possibility.
Yeah, the brain could have absolutely made a connection to the devil putting another brain into his body, thinking that it's not supposed to be there. Yeah. Maybe it is. I don't want to pretend to know. I'm just hypothesizing. So the bottom line, right? He was diagnosed with schizophrenic disorder, chronic with uncontrolled symptoms and severe social handicaps. What was the solution? The solution was a series of 12 electroconvulsive therapy sessions, tranquilizers, occupational therapy, and supportive psychotherapy. Now, I will say this. Electroconvulsive therapy then, much different than electroconvulsive therapy now.
Yes.
And so I can only imagine what that was like for him, especially since they didn't really do much to anesthetize you like they do now. So that was their solution. And I didn't know a bunch about ECT. About that therapy, and I only know as much as I've seen in the Asylum series of American Horror Story or Nurse Ratched, right? So, have you ever covered ECT?
No, I haven't. No, I know it's a thing, and I know it still is a thing. But yeah, it probably was pretty barbaric back then. Yeah,
I just have a few bullet points, if you will indulge me.
Yes.
So in the late 1930s, ECT was invented in Italy, and they thought inducing seizures could relieve symptoms of mental illness. In 1940, news about the technique spread. ECT first was used in North America and Europe in 1940. It proved to be effective for a variety of neurological and psychiatric conditions, including major depression. In 1944, Vladimir Liberson shortened stimulus duration. That's probably good. 1952, Holmberg and Thesleff pioneered the modified ECT, which was anesthetized, which further improved patient comfort. In 1960s and then some, ECT was also used as treatment for homosexuality, which was then considered an illness.
Fuck.
Yeah, I didn't say I agreed with it. This is just the history there is. The use of ECT in this did not last because there was no evidence that it altered anyone's sexuality. Duh.
No fucking shit.
And today, research in this field continues. There are newer approaches being used, like repetitive transcranial magnetic stimulation. This is showing promise in extending the benefits. 8 decades after its discovery, ECT continues to be of benefit in the treatment of severe and refractory affective and psychotic disorders. Well, after that, don't we feel better?
I kind of like the study of psilocybin magic mushrooms in microdoses to help then to shock the shit out of someone. But we'll see.
I feel like there's a lot there that we're not talking about.
Yeah.
Because it's hard for insurance to charge you for mushrooms. So Victor went through a series of ECT treatments with other supportive treatments in addition. I guess there's something to be said for some other treatments being applied as well as, electricity. After 9 ECT sessions, he was more cooperative and sociable. I mean, at a certain point, you have to wonder if this was because of the ECT sessions or because he was just ready to be done with them.
Yeah. You're basically giving him the electric chair in shorter bursts and saying, feel better? Feel better? Feel better? Yeah, I feel better. I feel better. Holy shit.
I'm so much better.
Yeah.
Can you take the positive and negative away from my skull?
Yeah, because this is very negative.
Right, yeah. So he eventually got to the point where there wasn't much change, but his dad thought he was back to normal, which I don't think is much of an improvement.
No, especially because it sounds like he's been suffering for a very long time.
Right. So what the status quo is not.
Yeah. He was just really good at hiding it, is all it was.
Yeah.
Sad.
And on top of that, he wasn't even entirely hiding it. They just thought he was weird, maybe.
Maybe, yeah.
So he still believed that the Black Devil was with him. Quote, later he said that for the previous 2 days, he had concluded that all his ideas about the devil were only his imagination. In his belief, he had never been so clear in his mind and thought he was ready to go home and enjoy life better because now he was not scared at all. But being not scared is different than not believing it anymore.
Yes, it is.
Right? So he said he was free of the devil, but he also said killing was on his mind still. He thought about killing his brothers, his parents, sisters, classmates at school. And he told a patient that he was going to kill someone, but he had no reason to do this. He was just going to do it. But get this. So, quote, the hospital psychiatrist called Mr. Hoffman in one day and told him that Victor was schizophrenic, but that it was not too bad. Mr. Hoffman is his dad. Continuing the quote, Mr. Hoffman did not know the meaning of the word schizophrenic, except that it meant a mental disorder where the patient has difficulty controlling his mind. He later looked up the word in a dictionary.
Jeez.
He had no idea. So that's why a lot of this for me, from him, I get it. Like, I get what he's saying. He doesn't know. He thinks he's normal. He doesn't even know the definition of schizophrenic.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not a comment on his smarts, It's just a comment on people didn't know.
No,
right?
for sure, yeah. The small town, a long time ago. Yeah.
Right. And so I would overall call this a failure to communicate from the psychiatrist. The doctor, in addition, said that he'd be just as good as ever in a year or two. Despite this, Victor was discharged on July 26, 1967, to his father, who knew nothing about schizophrenia, with a prescription of tranquilizers.
Yeah, that'll work.
So no sooner had he had his dad got him, but Victor complained about the pills, giving him a backache. Tranquilizers, I'm pretty sure that's the opposite, but all right. From what I call the not surprised files, he soon stopped taking those tranquilizers. So released July 26th, stopped taking medication around August 8th. His father said he had far more pills than he should have had left. So it was probably as soon as he got back that he stopped taking them.
Probably, yeah.
Victor came home knowing that something was going to happen. He knew things were coming to a fork in the road, and would he take the high road or the murder road? I mean, I think we know the spoiler already, seeing as I'm covering him on this podcast, but let's go ahead and do just a timeline of the few days into the murder. So August 14th, 1967, Victor was on a tractor and it was a quiet day. He lay down on the sofa around 9:30 p.m. and fell asleep. On August 15th, he woke up at 3 a.m. and went outside to pee, as one does. He came back inside, tried to go back to sleep. He failed. Then he started imagining things. He went to the garage. He saw a dog and wanted to kill it, but he didn't. He worked in the garage, and when he couldn't work any longer, he paced up and down. He had a strange feeling on the right side of his head, and he said it was like his entire body had just been cut right in half.
Oh, God.
Yeah, it was like pleasure and a powerful impulse to kill came over him, and he thought about killing his parents. Not the first time, but he decided against that. He put gas in the car, loaded his .22 rifle, put it in the back, and drove off. You know, like you do. The mile from home, he saw a hawk, and he had an impulse to kill it, but again, he didn't. All I could think of was the comedian Jeff Foxworthy?
Yep.
If you have an impulse to kill whatever you come across, you might be a killer. That's what I think. So
might also be a redneck there, but
you know what? You're not wrong. He decided he would drive around for an hour and then go back home to do his chores. Looking for spruce to hunt squirrels, couldn't find any, and then he thought, I'm going to kill people instead.
Fuck.
So he saw many houses that he passed, and he found a house that had nothing unusual about it, and he decided to stop and go in. So the murder's on August 15th. He walked into the house, and someone sitting on the bed said, "Who is it?" And he kept saying that over and over again. And when he saw the gun, he jumped on the bed, and then Victor shot him. And Victor said, quote, "If he had talked quiet and told me I was wrong, it would have been all right. He could have helped me and I wouldn't have killed him, but he tried to stop me."
And it's awful, too, because it's a small town in the middle, northern Saskatchewan. No one locks their doors. No one.
No. So Mr. Peterson jumped off the bed after being shot and attempted to stop Victor. He grabbed Victor's neck, and Victor continued to shoot him. Victor shot him at least 11 times. Victor said, "I was a little scared when I shot him, but I wasn't sorry." Kudos to the dad. I mean, good grief.
Yeah.
At this point, as you can imagine, the family wakes up to chaos. He said they looked like pigs, and he had no respect for them at that point. 2 girls screamed and ducked under the covers, and he shot each of them. Then he heard Mrs. Peterson jump out the window. He went outside and shot her, and she had the baby with her.
Jeez.
Quote, he then went back into the house and shot the girls. They were, in his words, still screaming and making funny noises. They didn't die. The quote, bullet in the head just didn't want to kill them. I didn't want to shoot them anywhere else. I wanted to shoot them in the head because I would cut the head off and take it with me. Then I'd have those bullets with me. So he was thinking about people recovering. Yeah.
God.
He realized that some of the bullets passed through them, so he wouldn't have all the bullets. So he decided not to do that. But why did he kill them at all? He killed them because he didn't want them to identify his license plates when he left.
Mm-hmm.
One girl, Phyllis, was spared because she couldn't have identified him anyways. She hid, this is heartbreaking, she hid between her 2 dead sisters in the bed under the covers.
Man, that's not the only case I've ever heard of that, too. That's so awful.
Yeah, and of course, as dark as that is, quote, he heard the baby crying and went to the window and looked out, and the baby was on the ground, and the mother had fallen, and he asked himself what would happen to the baby, and then he shot it. He didn't want to shoot the baby. He said, quote, I hated myself for shooting it. I didn't want it to suffer. Maybe nobody would find it for 3 or 4 days. It would starve.
Good God. That is so awful.
Yeah. After that, he started looking for the cartridges. He shook out the blankets looking for them. He picked up 17 and pocketed them. Then he took a jar full of shells and $7 from the wallets that he found. And by shells, I don't mean bullets. He literally took a jar of shells, like
Wow.
seashells. Shells. Victor got home around 7:30 a.m. and his parents were up, and his dad asked him where he had been, and he felt sick. His mother scolded him for getting up early and driving. If only she knew.
No doubt. Jeez.
He milked the cows, but he had a hard time due to the murders. He felt rotten. He didn't sleep well during those nights. His mom came over to him and let him know that she heard via telephone that there was a murder at Shell Lake. So, there's a lot of times that we hear about murderers. Just recently during British Columbia, we hear, you do a murder and then they're so exhausted they nap. He was so worked up and sick about it. So I just wonder, to me, him getting sick about it does indeed kind of show some kind of remorse in a
Yeah,
way,
I think so. Yeah.
in an odd way. But so my question is, are you tired yet? Good friggin' grief. Okay, so here comes the RCMP on their horses and carriages and their bugles, and that didn't happen.
No.
They came in 3 cars, but I like to think it did. But the other option sounds a lot more entertaining.
Yeah,
I like
no doubt.
They took Victor's gun and boots. Police asked if he had ever been to Shell Lake, and he lied about it. Despite this, what Victor took away from all of this is that the police talked nicely to him, like he was a human being.
Mm-hmm. That must be nice for him.
Well, it sounds like that didn't happen very often. So the police ended up arresting him that Friday night. They took him to the office in North Battleford and told him that they had the murder weapon, which was his. You see, despite his predilection for voices and looking towards violence, I think this ended up being a lot like a guy who kind of wants to ride a roller coaster. He gets on the roller coaster and then realizes at the top he's afraid of heights and gets motion sickness.
Yeah.
Victor killed, and he did it, and he immediately got sick and horrified about it. Does it make it any better? No.
No.
Like we talked about, he committed terrible atrocities against a family. He eliminated all but 2 of the Petersons' nuclear family, and he left one small child to be cared for by her older sister, who just so happened to be living in British Columbia at the time. A lot of people would be like, she was lucky, but I don't know if she sees it that way.
No, she's alive, but I wouldn't say lucky.
Yeah. So it was determined that Victor was fit to stand trial. He stayed in Prince Albert Jail until the date of the prelim trial on October 24th. At this time, you can kind of imagine that a crime like this made its way around the bend.
Yes.
The Hoffman family was in the spotlight. Quote, they began getting letters. This is from his dad. Wonderful letters from Shell Lake. They were all sorry, and we didn't have one letter that had anything bad in it, only from the family of the family that was murdered, and you can't blame them. The threatening letters from Shell Lake didn't bother me. I put myself in their place thinking about it. Maybe I'd have felt the same way as they did.
Mm-hmm.
But you never can tell what people will do. The trial of Victor Hoffman on 2 charges of non-capital murder opened January 8th, 1968 in the Court of Queen's Bench in North Battleford before Mr. Justice M.A. McPherson and a 12-man jury. Something about this case, the entire case, is horrifying and fascinating. I think we've covered the horrifying. Where it gets fascinating is with the legal portion. Victor's lawyer, G.E. Noble, was quite the dude. He was in practice for 18 years when he got the case, appointed by Judge J.M. Policia. The lawyer Noble said, quote, I think the first reaction was, well, how could you get involved? But I think that by and large, the public understands better now the role of a defense counsel, and understanding that what we do is not necessarily what we think or agree with. It is a question of giving your client a chance.
Mm-hmm.
We knew perfectly well that he had done it, and everybody else knew that he had done it, so they saw. When we raised the legal defense, really a kind of technical thing that was what the defense counsel was for, as opposed to the kind that you see on TV, tricksters and shysters.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if this is still the case. At a certain point, the public may have understood that, but truly, I mean, we usually vilify defense attorneys. I don't know if it's because of their job, who they represent, or the fact that, you know, we've just come across super shystery folks in true crime or legal stories in general.
Well, unfortunately, there is a portion of them that are true shysters, right?
Right.
I'm sure that the vast majority of them are good people, but there's definitely an underbelly of shit.
Yes. Overall, the legal defense that was put together was absolutely brilliant. They did a great job. They were purposeful. And there are a lot of ways this could have gone. But when they took the high road, you know, it was a good thing. And they took a high road on a series of these things. Here's something, for instance. They could have called out Saskatchewan Hospital for letting Victor out when they had no right to.
Mm-hmm.
They could have said that. Noble knew that the hospital had, in his words, boobed. That's what he said. However, he also believed that one mistake shouldn't sink a hospital.
Yeah.
Because of this, he didn't feel it necessary to bludgeon the hospital. Imagine that. So, in fact, before this case, like everyone else, Noble didn't know much about psychiatry. It's no surprise there. And what this did, though, is push him to figure out everything he could to grasp the concepts that were involved in this case. And this also led him to want to work hard to make whomever was on the jury understand this as well. He said, quote, I thought that unless we got his illness across clearly and in some detail, we wouldn't overcome what I considered to be the danger, which was that people might say, we are fed up with those people being let out of a hospital and going around killing people, and we're going to say, in effect, to hell with it and convict him.
Mm-hmm.
In saying this, he knew he had to find some way to get the jury to know how sick Victor truly was. which I don't think there's any question that he was very, very sick.
Yeah, sad.
Right. Noble knew that he needed to start by communicating that Victor was a man governed by his illness. He lined up a solid set of experts, and their testimony was extremely helpful. There was one thing that I wasn't a huge fan of, and that was his commentary on Victor's mom. Now, that being said, I kind of see where he's coming from. He said, quote, "They didn't comprehend it. It just never occurred to them," his family. "Later, I put Mrs. Hoffman on the stand, and she was a beautiful witness because she's completely unsophisticated." This is his words. "I was trying to get incidents from her of very unusual behavior, and her evidence coming from this little unsophisticated Ukrainian lady with the high-strapped pumps and the blue socks, you couldn't imagine her telling a lie." Like I said, I totally get it. I just didn't exactly appreciate the way he characterized her, but, you know.
Yeah, I understand. But yeah, it's not great.
Right. So at some point during the trial, the defense put up Dr. A. Monheim El Meligi, M.A., diploma in education, Ph.D., BYOB, ASAP, all the things.
The acronyms and such.
Right. He had a report called, quote, "The Phenomenal World of a Mass Murderer," dated October 2nd, 1967. And he tested Victor using the EWI test. This is known as the Experiential World Inventory Test, which is done in retrospect to figure out how Hoffman felt the week he was discharged from the hospital. What was the conclusion? Well, I'm going to read it. I'm going to read it. Victor, unaware of the basis for his inability to stabilize his phenomenal world and to maintain integrity of his body, condemned himself for being inadequate and mixed his present symptoms with his past failures and disappointments. He felt he was nothing and lost his self-respect. Mr. Hoffman is ravaged by rage and self-hatred and is therefore susceptible to episodes of agitation. He reacted to his paranoid ideas with anxiety and hostility. His hostility seemed to be directly linked to his anxiety and distorted perceptions. For example, people looked fierce and dangerous, and when they looked at him, he felt petrified. In addition, he felt weary of life, lonesome, abandoned, useless, and a burden to his family. He saw his past life as a mess. He had no hope and had thought of suicide. These were, however, counteracted by hostility directed against the world.
Mm-hmm.
So in the end, the doctor thought Victor's improvement in the hospital prior to the murders was merely behavioral and nothing more.
Yeah.
What they were kind of arguing around was the Monotone rule, or the test. That was started by the English House of Lords in the mid-19th century, which said that every man's presumed to be sane and that to establish a defense on the ground of insanity, it's got to be clearly proved that at the time of committing the act, the party accused was laboring under such a defect of reason from disease of mind and not knowing that nature and quality of act he was doing, or if he did know it, that he did not know what he was doing was wrong. Oh, boy.
Yeah.
I know it's a lot, and it's just, this case just is so oddly fascinating. So I hope everybody's still strapped in. Mike, I know it's a lot.
I'm strapped in.
So the test focuses on whether a defendant knows the nature of their crime or knew right from wrong when it was committed. And in addition, under Section 16 of the Criminal Code in Canadian law, quote, "A person is insane when he is in a state of natural imbecility." Or, sorry, I choked on the word imbecility.
Yeah, that is quite the word to use. Wow.
Right. Or has disease of the mind to an extent that renders him incapable of appreciating the nature and quality of an act or omission, or of knowing that an act or omission is wrong. If imbecility is key, looks like I'm always going to be safe in a courtroom, especially in Canada.
Yeah. I'm hoping that word has been stricken now.
I can't remember. I have to look up again where I found it, but I'm pretty sure I feel like that's current, but I don't quote me on that. Nobody quote me on that. So near the end of the trial, the jury deliberated for a whole 3.5 hours.
Oh, wow.
Before they found Hoffman not guilty by reason of insanity.
Which
also
fair.
Yeah, and really impressive for the time, because the fact that it's hard enough for a defense attorney to educate a jury on like a specialist who's testifying, right?
Yeah.
Nowadays, let alone making a jury knowledgeable about mental health.
Yeah. Small town, pre-internet. Yeah.
Right. So the big question for the jury was not whether he was guilty. Obviously, we knew this, but it was it by insanity? And the question, what would it mean for him to be institutionalized or placed in a prison for the rest of his life? Which was most worth it? And the defense did their job. One of the jury members said, For the average person like myself, the only thing we can rely on is the information given to us by somebody like this. He was logical. I can recall when the doctor described the black devil that the boy saw. He made it so clear to every one of us that there wasn't any fooling about this. He did see this. He was compelled by this thing that he saw. The doctor got that message through to us exactly what the boy was thinking, that the boy was driven by something that was real. It was real. This is something that is hard for us to understand, but the doctor got to us. So, what happened post-trial? In January 1968, Victor was placed in an institution for the criminally insane in Penetenshassine, Ontario, for an indefinite period. Mr. Hoffman said, and this is the end, quote, "If this illness happens again in our family, I will know how to deal with it. I'd go to an authority, a good doctor, and do the right thing for him to make sure this wouldn't happen again." Which, I mean, my heart breaks. My heart breaks for him and the case and the family, the victims. I mean, the whole system.
Yeah, and even the perpetrator, because if he had been given, current day proper treatment,
right,
it probably wouldn't have happened. Nothing it wouldn't, but it probably wouldn't have happened.
Well, what confuses me is the idea that the psychiatrist said to his dad, he'll probably be okay in 1 to 2 years. And then they let him go like a couple weeks later.
Yeah, which is
crazy. Some tranquilizers. Yeah.
It's awful.
And the psychiatrist knew that his dad didn't know what schizophrenia was because he asked.
Yeah, so you should never be released into anyone's custody that has no idea how to help that person that is suffering.
Right. I mean, I don't know what the law was on physicians and educating. I would imagine it wasn't as big of a thing.
I don't even know what it is today, truthfully.
The thought probably was if you educate them, then you don't have a job anymore because now they know what's wrong.
Yeah.
But, I mean, nowadays I feel like a good chunk of doctors that I go to see do tend to educate a little more so. But you still have to be your own best, support system for any kind of healthcare. So, but yeah, so that's the story of the Shell Lake murders by Victor Ernest Hoffman. And I know that it was a doozy, but sometimes it's like the Yukon case with the source that I got, the source that I found. It was so damn good that if I omitted, any part of this, I feel like the case would be missing something.
Mm-hmm.
But sassy sketchy. Maybe it's sketchy now. I feel like that's like a board game. Sketchy.
That's like the Saskatchewan version of Monopoly.
I'm going to get so much shit mail. JT Brews Crime on Twitter.
Yeah. Oh, man. Well, hopefully you've enjoyed this episode. And we're going to keep going with provincial and territory crimes and, sprinkle in other themes as we go. So
we got a couple of doozies coming up.
Yes, we do.
Tune in and tell your friends and your enemies. And doggone it, join our Patreon.
Yeah. So you can go to brewcrime.com to check out all our sources and everything. And you can click on the link to our store. You can buy some of our merch. We'd love if you did. If you want to find us on social media, it's at brewcrime for all of the social medias. And then JT, yours is
JT Brews Crime.
And then if you want to support us, you can go to patreon.com/brewcrime. The money goes towards upgrading equipment, making the show better, paying for hosting and all that. And from the second level and up, you get a bonus episode every month. And all Patreon supporters get an RSS feed where you get ad-free episodes. So you don't have to listen to our ads that help us support the show. So,
and I will say this, that the next case we do for Patreon is a doozy. All I'm going to say is Pazuzu Algorod. So if you want to hear something about Pazuzu, join us on Patreon, at least for a month to hear it.
Yeah, exactly.
Woof.
Exactly. So shout out to our Patreon supporters. The Faves of Our Lives podcast, Amber, Three Beers In podcast, and True Crime Nana. Cheers. All cases found on Brew Crime are written by Mike or the guest that appears on that episode, and the sources are put into the show notes for each episode. We always want to give credit to the people that research the cases we talk about. Check out the store at tpublic.com/stores/brew-crime-podcast, where you can purchase gear like t-shirts, phone cases, stickers, pillows, and all kinds of other cool stuff. Brew Crime's intro was created by Mike using Creative Commons Attribution License audio from purple-planet.com, soundbible.com, and freesoundeffects.com. Logo design by Ben Greenberg. Thanks for listening to this podcast, and it's been a production of Pacific Beer Chat.
A fascination with the unknown has led me to research countless unsolved murders and missing persons cases. These victims are often forgotten in the hustle and bustle of everyday life. Nevertheless, they need their cases recognized in order to keep investigators working on it. These victims also deserve justice and peace in the afterlife. Here I will share them all with you, giving both the facts and the theories every Wednesday at 3:30 a.m. Check out The Great Unsolved for more information.
Yes.
I will play the intro.
Bring it.
The Oracle Network.
I should start that again because you said bring it. Take 2.
Yummy. Ooh, that was a good sound. We should capture that for sound effect.
Got everything set properly, yep. I edit this part out.
I know you're just like,
Well, my camera's in front of me,
yeah.
but the zoom is to the right. Story's in front of me. Zoom's on
Zoom
the left.
to the right, zoom to the left, and I'm the only. Okay.
And I'm really burpy all of a sudden. It's the problem with scarfing food.
Yes.
All right. Let's stout. Move on to 1998. Still no quances.
I like that word.
There we go.
Yeah.
And
Do you smell?
Oh, go ahead.
Do you...
The inquiry. I can't speak today. I had some Chinese food and then some pakoras.
I had Chinese food as well.
Mine was grocery store Chinese food, and it was okay.
Mine was just delivered.
Yeah, that's probably better. Oh, excuse me. Fuck. Even worse, the Pleaves.
And that was not nearly as good sounding as yours was.
Well, you've got a bottle, I think, right?
That's true.
Yeah.
I do. I wish I got to get better at the whole describing thing in Saskatchewan. I knew that was going to happen. For those of you at home, I'm only a second beer in. I can't even say it, but I know we picked this just so I'd do this. Canadian Encyclopedia says there is, quote, no clear line that divides mentally health. Sorry. Whoa. Let me try that again. Woof.
You were listening to me.
I just forgot a couple of letters. Leask. You think Saskatchewan's hard? This 5-letter word, Leask. Leask. Forget it. You can cut that out.
What's the town called again? Let me just look it up quickly.
Yeah. One moment. Shell Lake. Leask. Leask.
Leask. Least Saskatchewan. 2 directions.
Yep.
I ain't singing that one.
Yeah, no. So
no, should I get rid of that joke?
No, I think it's funny. Don't get rid of it. Where did I lost my spot? All right, here we go. It's a great success. Thought-inducing seizures. It proved to be a quick. I say quick. All I can think of. I'll write a shorter script next time.
No.
Penitentiary. This is worse than Saskatchewan. Penitentiary. You know what? Pause for a second. I'm going to send this to you. Copy. Chat.
Like I'm going to be able to figure it out. Let's take.
Well, I don't know. You may have heard of it. I have no idea. Sorry, I chatted you in the Zoom.
Oh, in the Zoom.
Yeah.
I forgot that was a thing on here.
I know. I know. Penitentious. I can't do it. In P City, Ontario. I feel like I'm having a stroke.
Penitentiacine, I think. Penitentiacine.
Penitentiacine. Okay.
Just start it that word.
Penitentiacine. Okay.